How's everybody doing? We're back. This is the Shepherd Station. I'm Eric Duhame, Thomas Brown, Andy Hughes. We are coming to you at a new location. We've decided to change things up a little bit, and we hope you enjoy the show still. We're going to continue to bring you the good content that we have been bringing you. We're going to have, for 2025, Andy's got a whole list of people that he's trying to get here for, our guests that we interview. We're pretty excited about that, and hopefully you guys keep, tuning in and paying attention to what we got to put out.
Yeah, and I keep having people. I was in the bank the other day, and this lady told me, she said, "Oh, I saw you on a podcast." And she said she was talking about the one with Scotty Blankenship.
Oh, yeah.
And that thing, I don't know how many times that episode has been passed around.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, she said that she got it, and then she sent it to her brother, and her brother said, "I've already heard it," Yeah. And then I told her, how to go find all the rest of our episodes and everything. So she's going to tell her husband and her brother to go check out the rest of our episodes.
So many people have sat there and said they watched that Scott Blankenship episode.
Yeah.
He's such a popular guy, and it was such a really strong story.
It was.
Yeah.
And I've got the same thing. People, they always mention Scotty B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we got so many good things, good people that we've actually interviewed. If you haven't watched us before, go to YouTube, tune in, it says Shepherd Station. Go back and see some of the interviews we've done. Yeah. We've had some really good shows.
Subscribe to the channel on YouTube and like the episodes that you listen to if you would, and that'll help us out on YouTube, get some more recognition, and get our videos pushed out to other people who haven't seen them or aren't familiar with the Shepherd Station also.
Yeah.
And if you're new, first time you've ever watched us, this is what we do. We've none of us are perfect. None of us could, we all know that we sin. We've all lived a life, that we know we've had to repent from. And what we want to do now is we want to give men, specifically, we kind of want to branch out to everybody, but men specifically, the tools they need to be better husbands, fathers, leaders in their community. And obviously, if you are new to the station, you know that, or you don't know, but those that have been listening, they know that Andy and I have got a long history in law enforcement. So we do want to further that as well, as far as giving up-and-coming law enforcement officers the tools they need to survive in today's society with integrity and good morals and those good values you got to have to lead in that environment.
Yeah, we want to encourage and inspire future generations of law enforcement officers to serve our great nation into the years to come, because if we don't inspire future generations, then where will they come from?
Yeah.
Will we have any? And who will they be? And we want to make sure that we're inspiring servant leaders, people who already have a servant's heart, not just somebody that's wanting a job too. So anybody that that wants some advice on that, or wants to get any of our viewpoints on becoming a law enforcement officer, what it takes, what it looks like, what your family life could be, what retirement looks like, feel free to shoot us a message on YouTube, or we got some other
Facebook,
we got
Instagram.
We got I forgot about our Facebook page. Yeah, we got a Facebook page and an Instagram page also.
Yeah. Didn't you get us an X?
Yeah, we have
X,
an X.
Twit, 12, whatever it is.
Yeah, we got X. We got TikTok.
Oh man, these things are going to get knocked over.
Yep. Sorry.
Just be still.
I got to be still. I can't be still this morning. I've had too much coffee.
But if you got any questions about wanting to be a law enforcement officer, or what it takes to be a cop, what it looks like I said, your family life on through retirement, would be more than glad to help somebody out, try to inspire some future generations of law enforcement officers. Good cops. We don't just need cops. We need good cops.
We haven't really touched on that in a long time. Obviously, it's been several weeks since we've been and recorded. We took the holidays off, but for everybody that is new to this, let's talk to them about it. Take 5 minutes. That's really all I want. But over this past year, I haven't been active with law enforcement after the wreck that I had. Haven't been really doing anything, and it's given me a lot of time to think about things. I went through this whole spill about the whole environment has just almost become toxic. And when I say toxic, I don't see the things that I saw when I went into it. Mm-hmm. I went into it, but you could have paid me $100 a week.
Yeah.
and I'm gonna sit there and do it, because that's just what I wanted to do. You were the same way.
I've done it for free.
Exactly. You did it for free. When I started, I was a reserve officer. I didn't get paid. I went and did my job, and then I went and rode for a full shift, for free. And so that you had that heart to do the job, for whatever reason it is. I had an old training officer look at me, and I used this when I was a field training officer too. He said, "Why do you want to be a cop?" And I'm sitting in the car. "Why do you want to be a police officer?" Blah, blah. "Well, I want to serve and protect my community, and I want to, help others, and blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Shut your mouth. You want to drive fast, carry a gun, and chase bad guys." I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's what I want to do." But at the end of the day, you had that desire, that calling. You really wanted to do the job. And now, fast forward now, man, I watch. It's almost like everybody's gone into this free agent mode. Let me go to the next best place where
there's no loyalty anymore. You don't find a lot of cops. I'm not going to say a lot, but there is a minority of law enforcement officers today that will jump ship in a heartbeat to go to another agency. They don't, and I'm never going to fault somebody for bettering themselves if they're leaving one law enforcement job to go to another one that's better. And then maybe one that's better. It's a career progression thing. But people that just jump agencies, and then you got some officers that are gypsies that they never settle down in an agency. I've known guys that have worked for 15 and 20 different agencies during their 25-year career in law enforcement. And the reason there is because they have problems pretty much everywhere they go. But the thing about it is they have problems in one agency and they're asked to leave. Maybe they're not fired. And then there's no database where it says they're fired.
That next agency can get that information.
Yeah. And then nobody's going to say, you go back to the old agency, nobody's going to say anything bad about them. And it's like, no, don't hire this guy. They don't need to be a cop. And then somebody else hires them. Then they have the same issues or other issues at another agency. And then they leave from there and they go to another one.
Why is that the case? Like, I mean,
they're just problem cops.
Well, I'm saying, like, why don't they, if they go back to another agency, like another police department, why don't they say, hey, they don't need to be a cop?
Well, a lot of times personnel records are confidential, and typically a lot of times a personnel department at agencies, they'll only say if they're available for rehire or not. They may tell you that. Say, no, they're not available for rehire. Well,
but other jobs,
that's a clue, there.
Yeah. But other jobs that you have, like if you see that someone's jumping, it's like
it's such a liability driven society now that nobody wants to get in trouble for being the cause that this guy didn't get hired or better himself, right?
A lot of times, but outside the private sector, because I know that's what you're used to as a private sector.
Yeah.
In the public sector, you have personnel departments in counties and cities and federal agencies. So a lot of times they have more stringent rules and regulations as to what information they will release, on an employee.
Oh,
so and a lot of that's changing too, though, because now you have to. everything gets reported to APOS now.
Yeah. And I'm glad of that. I mean, we need that because you don't need guys jumping around. They're a problem until something really bad happens.
If an officer leaves, on his own, or if he gets terminated, everything gets reported to the department's supposed to send written notification, stating, hey, this officer no longer works for us, and this is the reason why. All right, so there is a database that's being built now.
Right.
That can, help kind of stop some of that stuff. But when I said that things are kind of toxic, when I went in, you could have never told me that it didn't matter if you liked the guy or you didn't like the guy, you liked the girl, you didn't like the girl. If you guys were policing together, it was a family. You kind of stood behind each other, And as this past year, I've watched a lot of stuff, and I think that I see that going away a little bit. And I think what our job to do, or what we need to do, as the dinosaurs, the has-beens, whatever you want to call us, but we need to bring back why you're doing that job. And I don't think it's not as bad as I see it, and it probably isn't. I think that a lot of that is maybe me, because I'm not in it like I used to be.
You know what one of the biggest problems in law enforcement is?
What's that?
Jealousy.
I can see that. Yeah.
You know that. It's jealousy. People that work, people that do a good job, then you got the haters out there. And they're going to the ones that just come to work. They just take the calls that they're given. They don't do any proactive law enforcement. They're not a go-getter or anything like that. Then they're going to backstab and talk about the ones that do get out and work and do get recognized, and do a good job and are recognized in the community or by the agency. And you've got these other cops out here who are just there to collect a paycheck, and I got to go from this call to this call, this call to that call, and I'm not going to initiate anything if if nothing happens. I'm not going to initiate anything on my own. I'm not looking out here looking for crime, looking for something to get into. And then they're going to fault the guys that do, because a lot of times the ones that are out there that are humping it, that are really doing a good job, they're making these other ones look bad, or they're making them have to work.
Yeah, and they don't like that.
At least they're having to go run a backup for the guy, the one that's out there really humping it.
Well, we've always said that there's, unfortunately, I hate to say this, I was going to add that, I've been on both sides of that. I've been the guy that sat there and, been that hater, and I'm not proud of that. But then I've also been on the other side where people are saying, those things about me. And I get it, and you're right. But, in every department, we've always said this, there's the call takers and the call makers. You got those guys, and you need a good mix of that, because you need the guys that are going to stay available to handle the calls for service. But then you also need those guys that are going to go out and they're going to hunt the crime.
They're looking.
They're the ones that are going to make things happen and find.
They get out of the car. They get out on foot patrol. There's some officers who ride around the car, air conditioner on, window up, and they never look anywhere, never listen to anything but the radio or their phone or the computer in the car, and that kind of thing. Then you got guys riding with the windows down, and they're running with their lights off and driving in some back alleys and field roads and stuff like that, looking for crime.
A 1988 Ford Crown Victoria. I would ride around what we called the bottoms in Dothan. Blacked out. We called it blacked out. You can't black out a blue and white car. My initial one was blue and white, but you ride around no lights on, and you would be amazed at how quiet a 1988 Ford Crown Victoria can be. And
what I used to love to do, we go to the bottom, and everybody mistakenly calls it the bottoms.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as the bottoms. It's the bottom. It was called Baptist Bottom because it does go down in a
right.
And it's the area basically between, Montana Street and Oak Street.
Well, you had the bottoms, you had this,
back
you had
over to Newton.
you had the east side, you had the far east,
Ford Country.
China, what we called it. Why'd you call it China? Well, it's the far east side of the city.
It's the far east. Yeah. That's funny.
But, I used to love to, we'd go over in the bottom, park our car up on Montgomery Highway or up on North Oak Street around that way, and then get out and get on foot, man, and just walk between buildings, stop.
Oh, yeah.
Get in between some houses, between yards, and just stop and watch and see what's going on. We're in dark uniforms slipping down through there, and it'd be amazing what you could see. And then we'd put a car out on the perimeter, riding the perimeter in case we got in a foot chase or whatever. But
Linden Street used to be the worst for that, man. Linden Street was this, small, wasn't very long, and a little block street, and it had just rows of shot houses on it. These little bitty shotgun houses.
Linden and Atlanta Street.
Linden and Atlanta.
Short
Atlanta. Yeah, Short Atlanta. Man, I got into a good scrap on Short Atlanta.
It's a little dead end street, about 3 houses on each side. It deads in.
Oh, wow.
The short part of Atlanta Street.
Yeah, I took 2 guns off of a guy, and turns out he was a guy I went to school with. Ended up having to put him in jail.
Oh, wow.
And then his buddy took off running. We got in a scrap with that guy because he wanted to. He really wanted to stay out of jail. So, but ultimately he ended up going. But yeah, that was that whole area was pretty active for a while. But anyway, I go back to what I was saying. We're kind of getting off track. I really want to support. I've looked at it like, man, I've actually told people, hey man, how can I become a police officer? I'm like, man, you really need to think about it. I don't know if I do it nowadays because society's so against police right now.
You're part of the problem.
I know that was making me part of the problem. Because if we don't have cops, if we don't have law enforcement, if we don't have firefighters or medics or nurses or doctors, we have chaos inside. Society starts crumbling. And I was being part of the problem. And I know that. When what I should have been doing is saying, hey, man, that's a good decision to make, but you really need to think about it.
You need the reality of the job.
Right. You need the reality of it.
Yeah.
And you need to have the heart to do it. You can't just go into this job. You've said this before. These recruiting tables at schools where, hey, come over here. We'll give you, $27 an hour or something like that, and a new car, and all these benefits and all this, time off and all this. They're basically selling somebody who would have never really thought about it.
Right.
But you need to have that calling in your heart to go do it. It's like Andy said. Andy did it for free. The first year that I rode around in a Dothan police car, I literally rode around going, I cannot believe they are paying me to do this job. Now, after about 5 years, I was riding around going, I can't believe I'm getting paid. You know? But I mean, that happens with everything. But you still had that servant heart, man. You still had that desire to go and do the job.
Yeah.
And I think I've been looking at things the wrong way. You know, we get that whole, we've been doing it for so long, you kind of get bitter, cynical. And as I've been kind of reflecting on that, I do want to see, I still love the job. I still love so much about it. You know, the adrenaline that came, which didn't, people don't need to get this false thing. We're always running and gunning and doing all this. You're not, man. You got about 85% of the time it's mundane, it's routine, word that you never want to use in the job, but
Yeah.
you're doing paperwork, you're doing patrol, you're doing investigation, legwork on whatever you're doing, but it's that 5%. It's that 5% that you're like, oh man, my hair's on fire. Let's go. You know? And I still love those parts of the job. I even love the investigative parts of the job. You know, and I think that it's our job as where we are now to drive and instill that in these new guys coming up and teach them a better way to do it instead of, because what I see so much is guys are out for themselves right now. I see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And I see a lot more of this. They're focused on one thing. They're not paying attention to constitutional issues. They're not paying, and I'm not saying that they're not being trained well.
Right.
It's just that those things aren't being taught as much or put at the forefront of what we should be doing. We need to be teaching these guys, man. We need these guys. And I need to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? Encouraging these guys that come to me and like, hey, how could I become a police officer? How could I get in law enforcement? You really need to sit down and think about the reality of it, like you said, and then here's how I can help you.
Right.
Because if you truly have that heart to do it, I don't want to stifle that.
No, not at all. You're talking about being constitutional. Tell a funny story. You know, and I used to always tell cops, said, listen, this case that you make, this is your case. All the way from the time that you make the arrest, lock somebody up, go to the first appearance, go to the preliminary hearing, go to grand jury, go to trial, and then all the way through all the appeals process. This is your case, all the way through. And you need to make good cases that will hold up in court, you know, that will withstand the scrutiny of the United States Constitution. And I never thought about it this one way before, but we had an all-hands meeting one time at Dothan PD and had everybody in the patrol room down there. You know, everybody we could. You know, had a few people out working, but Chief John White had an all-hands meeting. Had a guy in the back there. I'll remind you who it was. I'm not going to call his name now. He's actually deceased now, so I'm not going to mar his name. But he's in the back, you know, just gibbering, jabbering a little bit while the chief was trying to talk. And the chief says, and I think we were talking about something about reports or this, that, and the other. And anyway, the chief says, hey, you know, and he called the officer's name. He said, yeah, Chief. He said, have you ever thought that any report that you do related to a case with the police department could wind up in front of the United States Supreme Court and become case law? He said, no, so I never thought about that. He said, I can tell. I've read some of your reports.
Jeez.
Well, it's the truth, though.
It was the truth. You know?
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's crazy.
You know, some of these officers, I used to tell them, I said, what you need to do when you're writing reports, and just like you, I mean, you got to make good cases. You're tying yourself to that person or that group of individuals for a long time, maybe even the rest of your life. You never know.
Right.
And so you've got to make these strong cases that don't violate the Constitution, that doesn't violate their rights, and that's going to stand, like Andy said, the test of either it being municipal court or district court, circuit court, all the way even up to, you know, United States Supreme Court, you know, on some kind of, like he said, case law issue. Your report needs to read like a book. If I'm not at that agency any longer, somebody should be able to pick up my report and
paint a picture for them.
Yeah, know exactly everything that's going on.
Right.
And you need to look at these cases like, man, this literally could be a case that could change case law for the entire country.
Right.
And when you look at it like that, man, it really kind of, ooh, that's heavy.
Yeah, you know? That is. That's really heavy.
Yeah. We had an investigator one time at the sheriff's office, not when I was sheriff, but like way back in the 80s. And he would investigate a lot of child sexual cases. And he would take a tape statement from the victim, and if the offender wanted to give one, if it did get one, he'd take a tape statement from the offender, of course. And his whole report, and this is bad leadership that let this happen. His whole narrative on his report would be see tape statement. Basically,
That's lazy.
see tape statement.
That's
Very
lazy.
lazy. Now, and I come from the time period where we had to handwrite.
Yeah.
We had to handwrite them out, and then when I was in narcotics, I used to dictate them a lot. And Beth Harrison, would
yeah.
sit there with little headphones on, and she would sit there and type the report.
She
from
took care of us,
our
man.
dictation. And if you've never dictated a report, that's kind of hard to do too. You got to really kind of get in a rhythm, to dictate a report. Got to have you some notes out there. But anyway, back in those days, man, use whiteout a lot. If you had to go back and write something out and then write it again, that kind of thing. But today, with the way computers are and technology, there is no excuse whatsoever for not writing a very detailed report. Because,
Oh man, you got spell check. You got all this stuff that can help
can
you.
paste, copy and paste stuff. And
Or you can just talk it into your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, and it'll write it out for you.
So there's just so many ways now to write a detailed report. There's no excuse for not writing a detailed
I have a
report.
question about
And cops, a lot of them, they didn't want to go to the stand with a report because they thought, this make me look bad, like I didn't remember what happened.
no.
But it may be 4 or 5 years sometimes before you actually went to a trial on a felony case. And so, I always tell them, always testify from your report. Never shy away from referencing your report to get the details right either. And,
If it wasn't in the report, it didn't happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you should
that makes sense.
and you should write that report to where there's no question that some defense attorney is going to ask you that shouldn't be in your report.
Right.
That you can't.
Your
give,
report
give a valid answer for.
Should actually be so good that when
on a plea.
the defense attorney reads it, he goes, "Man, you're screwed. We got to plea this out."
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, that's right. So with all of that, I have a question that just popped in my head, and I don't know that you guys have thought about this a whole lot because you're not you are still to a degree, and I know you have been here recently, but it's changed so much. Like you said, what about the use of like AI inside of law enforcement?
it scares me. It really scares me.
Like, what does that even look like? Because I know what it looks like for me in my career field, but
Let me add. Well, not add, but give my opinion on some of that.
yeah,
I think law enforcement's got too technology driven. Now, technology is great. It really is because, and this could go into some of the stories we're going to talk about in a little bit. Was it you or me that pulled over that 18-wheeler? The guy was out of Brownsville. You pulled him over, didn't you?
One at Kmart's south side over there.
No, it wasn't Kmart. It was at Hartford Highway.
Okay.
And we pulled him off. You pulled him off into the parking lot. I think it was you. It was either me pulled him over or you pulled him over. I can't remember. And you ran him through.
Text and Natus.
Yeah, and all that. And I mean, all this technology and all these programs that we had, they're great because it's got all this information. This guy had come across, in Brownsville, and he, a year prior had got popped with like 400 pounds of illegal narcotics in his semi. And it starts out with this guy speaking perfect English, man. This guy's a Mexican driver, remember? And so I think you stopped him and called me over there. I can't remember exactly. But I got there and talking to the guy, whatever. And he's talking like you and me. But the more we started talking about, hey, man, you mind if we search your car? You're going to search your truck. And this, by the end of the conversation, no habla. No habla inglés.
oh my
I was
god,
like, okay, whatever. man.
yeah, right, like okay,
But I mean, I go into that. I mean, that there was technology there for us to find all that information out about him. Technology is a good thing. But every time I see a police officer now, especially when I went back to Dothan for a short time, man, everything's so tech driven. You lose the human element of policing. And the human element of policing is what makes policing as effective as it does. In Dothan, Alabama, they've got all these cameras and they're trying to, I don't know if they have it now, but it's a program and hardware that if you hear a gunshot in a certain area, it can literally pinpoint.
Shot spotter.
wow,
Shot spotter, yeah.
oh wow,
It can pinpoint where that came from. And I mean within a very, very close, small area.
wow,
And to me, that starts getting people relying too much on technology.
yeah,
When I ride by a patrol car, and they're pulled off on the side of the road. When I say the side of the road, they're in a parking lot, they're doing whatever. I can almost guarantee you they're going to have their face in their screen and they're not looking around as to what needs,
oh
what
yeah,
they need to be
I've
doing.
driven by police before and been like, been a little bit over the speed limit or something, and seeing him and slow down and be like, oh gosh, okay, I don't want him to turn his lights on. I look over and he's not even looking.
He's not even looking at you.
Yeah, he's just sitting there. I'm like, oh, I didn't even have to. I didn't have to worry about it. Yeah.
And the thing is you have so much technology coming out now. I mean, eventually, I could see where it makes the human element obsolete. And I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
One of the best things in law enforcement and technology. There's so much stuff in the cars these days. I remember we didn't have anything but a radio and your PA system. You had a flashlight charger.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's it in the front seat.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest things in law enforcement is riding a 2-man car with a good partner.
Yeah. You got one driving and one watching.
You got one driving and one. I mean, you got 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of ears. You're riding around in the community and talking to people and seeing things. Your partner that's not driving is seeing more than you're seeing. You can drop one guy out on foot, to go around and come up and surprise somebody, and the car can pull around this way. You got one in a foot chase. You got bail a guy out. And you still got a guy on a car that can circle around and have a perimeter set up.
How many times do you take off after somebody when you're riding by yourself? Yeah. You take off by yourself after a guy that bails either out of a car, off the side of the road, whatever. And okay, so you got a shotgun in your car. Up to a certain point when we started, it was what you had. You had your firearm on your side, and you had a shotgun. The North Hollywood shootout, what year was that?
94, I think.
Something like that. Mid 94, the North Hollywood shootout that lasted, 44 minutes?
Yeah.
And that was where these officers need, patrol rifles. So, but nowadays you got a shotgun in your car, patrol rifle in your car. Most officers carry additional firearm in their car. Yeah. So you bail out on somebody. You're not thinking, okay, let me run after this guy. Hold on, let me lock the car.
Yeah.
You take off after the guy. You go try to catch him. How many times you call on the radio? Hey, man, have a unit secure my vehicle.
Yeah.
I always had a belt keeper with a spare key hooked on it right here. So I would jump out. And the thing about it is these new cars these days, and I hate new vehicles because of all the technology. Going back to that, I don't even know if you can jump out and lock a police car and leave it running.
Oh yeah,
I don't know that
probably
you can.
not.
I don't know, but when we had the Crown Vics and everything else, I just jump out and lock the door as I'm getting out and leave the car running. When you went to work at night, unless I went to the station for a period of time, I never turned my car off for 8, 10, 12 hours.
But now you have supervisors that are sitting there telling their officers, man, save the gas, turn the car off. No.
I go in a store somewhere to get a cup of coffee or
leave the car running.
Whatever, leave the car running,
Well, how do you, wait, what if somebody steals your car?
It's locked.
How do you get into it?
I got a spare key.
Oh, you got a spare key. You said that.
Let me tell you, I'm going to give you
I'm not even
I got taught a very, very valuable lesson by this man sitting over here.
You better have a spare key.
So Andy got real big into the highway enforcement because, man, I keep hitting your mic. There's a lot of narcotics coming down the highway, right? So Andy sits there, he gives me a dog, and he says, all right, man, go out there and work. I want you to. So I pulled this one car over. Really wasn't nothing to it. I'm going to stroke this person a ticket because when I walked up, they were very rude to me, right? And that's really where I was going to lead it.
Yeah.
Walked back to my car. I'm like, I'm about to write you a ticket. I'm about to write you a ticket. I went to open the car, and guess what? Car was locked. I'm sitting on 231 South near the circle, and got my blue lights going, and I'm sitting outside of my car. My ticket book's sitting on the car's back. We hand wrote tickets, right?
Oh my god!
I looked in there. I'm like, because I kept a spare key in my wallet, so I reached for my wallet.
And your wallet's
my wallet's in the console because I just got out of the convenience store. And I just set my wallet down, right? And so I'm sitting there going, what am I gonna do?
Today's your lucky day.
Yeah, today I did. I walked back in the car and said, you know what? I was going to give you a ticket, but I decided I'm just going to give you a warning. You slow down,
I've decided.
You do whatever, and you get out of
the goodness of my heart.
So when that person leaves, now I'm sitting there on the side of the road, standing by my car with the lights going. And I was like, I ain't got no choice.
Can you 1040 with me down here?
Yep. I called Andy on the radio. We had a different channel. Nobody else would hear. I'm like, hey, can you meet me over here? I need you to go by and get my spare key or whatever, and go spare key to the car.
And we had spare keys at the PD.
Okay.
Where spare keys are at. The sergeant, had a key. You could go in there and get a spare key for a car.
Okay.
So Andy, responds, is like, yeah, I'll be on the way. Next thing I hear is 297. I was like, he's going to do it. 297. I'll be en route to 434's location with his spare key all over the radio. I was like,
Probably
And
didn't do
he
it
was
again,
like,
did
no
you?
shame.
I learned at that point you have multiple spare keys.
He's like,
I
he's
always
going
had, we always had
learn today.
the little tabs that they put on the meter boxes. We always had those to put the key on. I would put a single key to my Crown Vic on that. I had a belt keeper right behind my holster. And I would put that spare key on there, and I'd leave it on there. That's what I'd use to get in and out of my car with, because I'd lock it and leave it running. Pretty much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like I said, I had multiple after that. That wasn't the first time I did it. I did it, on an FTO when I was a trainee, and I thought I learned at that point. I got arrogant and cocky, and I apparently didn't learn what I thought.
Oh,
I did,
yeah.
So.
No, I get it.
But yeah,
That's
that was
funny.
embarrassing.
Yeah, so technology in that. So I think that the reason I asked that is because it really does seem like the more technology is involved in policing, the less empathetic probably policing gets and the less personalized, like you're saying. Like you start going by just what you see versus what somebody, you can't make those.
As a police officer, you have to be fair and just to everybody. But I would agree with you that the more that technology gets introduced into it, especially on the AI side of things, and I don't know that much about AI. Personally, it scares me. I'm not comfortable with it. I think it can be manipulated so easily. And I do think that you're right. It's going to take a lot of the empathy and the even the sympathy and the compassion that a police officer needs to have when he's dealing with the public and human beings.
Yeah. Because it just goes on the facts or what it sees.
Right.
And I don't know how AI is being implemented into the police department and law enforcement and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure what
the
that
thing
even
is,
looks
is
like.
it doesn't. I mean, you can sit there and teach a computer to mimic emotion. Obviously that's what they're. I see a lot of things where they're talking about all these things are learning and they're evolving and they're doing this and that. Emotion comes from your soul.
Right.
Emotion comes from the human condition, and emotion comes from inside you.
Yeah.
And if you, like I said, as a police officer or a law enforcement officer, you have to be fair and just with everyone. And that's right down to the person that, got their property stolen, or the person that was victimized in a violent crime, all the way to the bad guy that perpetrated the crime. You have to be fair and just with everybody. And if you don't have that ability to have compassion and have that emotional side to you, you're not going to make a good police officer. And I think with technology like that, it does. It takes a lot of that away.
Right. Well, and that's what I was getting at was you're saying a lot of people just go and do a job while also implementing this thing that can help you just do the job as well. You know what I mean? The more technology we have, the more...
Yeah,
it's just a job. I just do the thing, push the button, it's taken care of. And
I know Andy will agree with this. There's, again, going back to the human side of things, when I tested for my very first police test, there's so much on there that they're looking for a certain type of person. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'm not saying that anybody can go out there and be a police officer.
yeah,
But with technology, you can implement these tech tools that almost do the job for you.
right.
Like when I was sitting there, when I would take the test, you have to have this certain level of ability to observe. What's the other word I'm looking for?
Or to read, comprehend.
Comprehend. You have all these skill sets that you need to have, kind of like almost built into you. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can sit there and be a police officer. They can't do it.
Right.
But with technology now you can get these guys that are coming in. Well, I just need a job. When,
Right.
And anybody can sit down and push a button on a car or
Right.
a computer and do certain things. I think that technology, too much of it, is going to take. When you start having this stuff do the job for you, it takes away good cops that do the job instinctively. I can't tell you how many times that instinct solved cases. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm going to kind of reserve some judgment. I think some of the AI is going to help on report writing. Not that AI needs to write the report for you, but
Yeah.
if you're trying to figure out how to phrase something
Right.
to make sure that you get your point across, you get
Right.
the details in there, asking AI for that. And I think there are some tools that they've got out now to assist in report writing. And if you want to get those phrases, you shouldn't be able to tell AI, write me a report
Right, on
about
this-
me catching a
this
guy with a
happened,
gun
this,
on North
and-
Oak Street on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. And it
Right,
writes a report
right,
for you.
right.
But if you can use AI to, like I said, figure out how to use the best phrase to get
Yeah.
your point across, that's one thing.
Well,
to
and
do.
that's sort of the extent of what I feel like could happen and should probably happen with AI is like it just is a supplement to the things you do versus doing the things for you.
We were talking about technology, and this quote came to me, and I had read this quote before in a book, and this from Albert Einstein, and it says, I had to look it up to get the verbiage just right, but concern for man and his fate must always form the chief interest of all technical endeavors. Never forget this in the midst of your diagrams and equations. It's always
That's good.
about the human factor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No
absolutely.
matter how technical that
That's
we
the
get.
biggest
Right.
thing that scares me with it, though. And it just does.
Don't let it do it. You can't let it do the job for you.
It
No.
does. It scares me that it's going to turn into people relying on it so much that they let that do the job for them.
Yeah.
And-
But
but
when that
wouldn't-
happens, man. What
Wouldn't
could-
that just be? Isn't that just like the perfect narrative though to slip AI in and like technology in to say, well, people don't like police anymore. We're having a lot of issues with police now.
Oh, sure.
AI doesn't, the technology doesn't get it wrong. Like they
Right.
get it right every time. They know they can search databases
See, I'm not the
faster
only
than any faster than any human can. All these things, and it's like it just does a better job overall. We're not going to get angry with a robot. We'll get angry with the person. All these things escalate with people. They don't have to escalate with
AI is not going
technology.
to play favorites. Blah,
Yeah,
blah,
all
blah.
these things.
Yeah.
Like it just seems like the perfect narrative to slip.
The scary thing about that to me is, like I told you, it's also easily manipulated.
Yeah, right.
And
But
at that point,
you can never take the human factor out of law enforcement. Never.
Yeah,
Never.
right.
and when you
Right.
do, I think you're making a very, very critical mistake.
Right. But and it's like you think about all the old movies though, that it's like they imagine a world where that is the case, where it's like policing is taken care of by technology. And,
Isn't that
it just
what they
seems to
call now maybe calling us the wrong? Isn't that like a dystopian?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that stuff is
exactly.
not good. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist right now. It's just thinking through it. It's like, that might be closer than we actually think. And that's a scary thing to think about,
is a
but
scary thing.
it's something we should be aware of to say, okay, I don't want to go down that path, so I'm going to do what I can to not.
Well, we need to make sure we have good leaders in place. That
Right. Exactly.
Don't let that
Yeah.
happen. And the community doesn't need to let that happen either. And the community deserves good, fair, effective, and professional policing done in a constitutional manner.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to add to that, the community does. Everybody needs to feel safe. They need to feel like they're protected. They need to feel like they have that person that they can go to, or that system they can go to, that agency they can go to. Sometimes justice needs to be sought.
Yeah.
I guess is the best way I can put it. And they need to feel like they need to feel comfortable when they're doing that. When they're going to that person, hey, I've been victimized in this way. So they do society deserves good, strong, moral law enforcement officers with a high level of integrity and wanting to get out. That's the key word. Wanting to get out and do the job for the right reasons. On the other hand, how many police officers do we have in the nation? Like just under a million?
800,000, 850,000.
All right, so how many people are in this country? 330 million, right?
something like that.
And less than 1 million law enforcement officers to protect all 330 million people.
Well, to serve and protect is kind of a fallacy.
Yeah, it is.
The Supreme Court has actually said that the police have no duty to protect anybody, really, because you can't. There's no way.
Right. Right.
We want to protect people, but very few times do we. The first thing we always want to do is we want to intervene in crime. Secondly, we want to respond to crime
Right.
and investigate it, but we would rather intervene in crime. The first thing we would actually like to do is prevent crime. If you
Right,
prevent
right.
crime, then intervene in crimes in progress
Right.
to stop them, or right before they happen, or respond to them and investigate crimes. So
Right.
The only way
but-
that you could effectively intervene in crime is out of all 330 million people in the country, 150 million of them were law enforcement officers.
Yeah.
That way you got a 1-to-1 ratio,
Yeah.
All right, this is my protector right here. That's the
Yeah.
only way you could intervene in crime.
Yeah, the actual ratio is about 2 officers per 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know like what the statistic is for people that are victims in a crime. What are the statistics for that? So like you have 330 million people. Out of those 330 million people, how many of those people are actually victims of crimes? I don't know. A certain amount of times a year.
It's pretty much it's a small amount.
Yeah. So you think
Very
about it,
small
it's like, well, okay, that kind of might work out to be like statistically balanced in a sense.
Well, but then you can get into how many of those people are victimized and actually they
How many
find-
crimes go unreported also?
yeah,
many
that,
crimes go
yeah, right.
reported?
We don't really know.
A lot of
And
them.
then
Yeah.
you get into the statistics of how many crimes are actually solved and the cases brought to a close. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
right.
if you have a 15% closure rate as far as solving rate, that's pretty high. Well, you'd have more
I
on
wouldn't
that.
accept that.
Well,
it,
no,
it would depend on it would depend on what the crimes. And if you're talking about arson,
Yeah.
you're talking about one thing. You're talking about
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that does depend on the crime. too.
burglaries and robberies. That's something different because arsons are typically harder to solve.
Right.
or
Well,
harder-
burglaries and robberies definitely hard to solve too because you got smash and grabs that
yeah,
there's no evidence left there.
yeah. It just
Now, if you have a 15% solving rate on homicide, you probably need to get some new detectives.
yeah.
Well,
But, I
I'm
mean, it
sure,
happens.
well, it makes sense to like really put all your energy and resources towards something the most heinous crimes. In a sense, it's like okay, you have limited resources. We're going to really focus in on the things that really deserve to have.
To go back to the point I was trying to make, though, is we talked about that society deserves to have law enforcement officers like we're talking about. On the other hand, law enforcement officers, we also deserve to have the support and the support is the best way I can put it. The support of the people that we serve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to have support of your community if you want to be effective as a law enforcement agency. You've got to have support. Now, we never need to pander to political groups or whatever, but we do need the public support.
Yeah.
We've got to have it in order to effectively police communities because without, like I say, 330 million people in this country, 900,000 cops. Who do you think are the real police?
Right.
The real police are the people.
Yeah.
Law enforcement officers are the ones that have sworn to an oath. They carry a badge. They carry a gun. They have expertise in certain fields. They have the ability to prosecute cases through the court system and that kind of thing. But the
Right.
people are the real police because if you don't have people feeding you information on crime, giving you information, giving you tips,
Yeah.
helping you out, providing you support, then you're not going to solve a whole lot of crime because contrary to what CSI or NCIS or any of the shows show, technology does not exist to solve crimes immediately.
In what, 38 minutes?
You've
Okay. Yeah.
you've got
yeah.
to have.
Well,
you've
and
got
that
to
is
have
what people are
information.
used to. It's like, oh, okay, this will be taken care of tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll be good.
Yeah. Well, this you've got to have support from the community. You got to have information from people.
Right. And that's that, people are shocked when it's like, oh, that case is being picked up 5 years late. Like it's been 5 years and they're just now prosecuting this,
I have
this person.
I have a murder trial that it's already gone to court or to trial one time, and there was a hung jury. I actually got a confession from the guy, but one of the jurors, it was a poor pick on the jury is what it was.
Yeah.
One of the jurors said, "No, I'm not.
Just not
I'm
going.
not
I don't
gonna
care.
vote."
I've had one like that before. That I don't care what the evidence shows. I will not convict.
Yeah, exactly, and that's pretty much what was said.
That
And-
person cannot be. You can't have
How
that
can-
person in a jury.
How
What
can
the
you
heck?
sleep at night like that? Because all the evidence showed that this person was guilty. This was a murder trial, and
Oh my!
I'm not going to call any
gosh.
names because it's still going to go forward. Because it was a hung jury. We're going to have a retrial. That was over 10 years ago, and we're still waiting.
That person is the one that is just
Cause
causing
the
it to-
mistrial. They cause the
they cause
mistrial.
the
Oh my god!
They got to have another trial.
But Andy's right. Police can't protect everybody. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's not possible. If a young law enforcement officer were to come to me nowadays, one of the things that I think that we need to be concentrating on is the priority of what kind of crimes there are. What we need to do is we need to protect life,
Yeah.
then property, and then all the other stuff what they term as victimless crimes. There's no really any victimless crime, but I've heard that term so many times. Victimless crimes like possession charges or property crimes, whatever. There's always a victim.
Yeah.
But we need to prioritize those. People's safety is what should come paramount.
Yeah.
So if a young law enforcement officer came to me today, I would tell them, look, man, go into some field where it's going to allow you to work those crimes that are protecting our borders or maybe working counterterrorism, stuff like that. Because I think that's where the biggest threat's coming in nowadays. Having watched some of the stuff that I do follow, I mean, those people that want to harm our country, they're already here.
Yeah.
That was, we've had a couple of attacks already. One you can say is for sure one, people want to sit there and go back and forth with it. And that's, I mean, we're not even out of January.
No. Well, I mean, it's just local, even here, we had a kid, Austin, who his car was vandalized by somebody that said, this just happened this past week. And it said, you mother effing Christians make my head hurt or something, put swastikas all over his car.
Really?
Yeah. And it just
That's going to happen more.
I mean, that's in Headland.
That's going to happen more. They've estimated, like, I don't remember how many thousand Islamic terrorists, jihadist extremists. I'm not knocking the Muslim religion. It's not my religion. That are already here, have crossed that border. Not to mention the Chinese element that they say have crossed that border. And then the illegals coming from, I say illegals, what do I want to call them, undocumented, I don't care, illegals. They're in the country illegally. Are they cartel members? Are they this? Are they that? Are they MS-13? All that stuff's going to come in here. It's going to start playing into the safety of this country.
Yeah.
Because they're here. I mean, there's several million of them here. We've talked about this on previous podcasts about the threat that's come across the southern border and even some in the northern border. Mm-hmm. The 9/11 terrorists came across the northern border, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't that right?
I think they were here legally.
Some of them may have been.
Yeah, I think they had visas.
I don't have information on that, but somebody had said that.
They actually went
that's right, they did have
training.
visas. Yeah, that's right, they
had
did.
flight training and all.
So yeah, that I might. Somebody had mentioned that, and I thought, okay, either way. Long story short, the illegal crossing into our country, I think, is where our biggest threat lies today.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to go into law enforcement now, I'm like, man, do it. And that's what I would focus on.
Yeah.
And people, U.S. citizens who have been radicalized, whether online or in person somewhere, maybe they've traveled overseas or had contact with someone via the internet. There's a lot of dark web stuff that goes on. And, they've been radicalized against the American way of life. But, I think Americans need to resign themselves to the fact that terrorism is a new way of life for the homeland, just like it has been for years in Israel and other countries
places
overseas where the terrorists live and are closer to. But now we have terrorists, either ones that have come through the southern border and they're here. They're in different cells. They're waiting for the command to carry out terror attacks. And then you've got American citizens who have been radicalized, maybe in prison. A lot of them convert to Islam in prison. It's a radical sect of Islam, and they're radicalized in prison against the American way of life.
Right.
And it's basically it's right versus wrong, East versus West, Christian versus non-Christian. And I say Christian versus non-Christian. I don't mean Christian like we are, like faith. I'm talking about Christian versus Islam, or Islam versus Christian, basically. Islam versus the world.
Right. Like Islam is just like
because
the radical sect of Islam.
A radical jihadist or an extremist, however you want to term them, they look at somebody from our country and we're just a Westerner. We're a Christian. We're automatically one.
We're automatic.
You're an infidel no matter what your faith.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you're not Muslim.
By the way, I'm proudly an infidel. Okay. So, but no, Andy's right. We as people over here, you could have, the only way to really truly protect people is to increase the number of police. And then you don't want that because now you become a police state, but people need to take take accountability for their own safety a lot of times too.
Yeah.
What's the old saying? When seconds count, police are only minutes away.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well, I've got a friend of mine up in New York City, a guy named Don Aviv. Don is the president CEO of a company called Interfor International. They do international investigations and intelligence work and security stuff. And Don and I trade out some work around the country on different things that we both do. But Don's father was a former Mossad. He's from Israel.
Yeah, I remember watching. I watched
Don
his.
before. I sent that to you before. But Don actually, I saw a clip that he had posted on LinkedIn a day or two ago, where he was interviewed by CNN after the attack in New Orleans on New Year's Eve.
Oh, wow.
And in 2019, Don's firm was hired to do a security assessment for the French Quarter in New Orleans. And they made numerous recommendations on things to do to protect the French Quarter area in New Orleans. And apparently,
They didn't do
None of them
most
did
of them
Were just ignored.
We're done, and he goes through the whole thing about the recommendations that they made. But people in America, we want to live in a world of convenience. Sometimes you got to trade some security. I'm not saying trade security for freedom.
No.
I'm saying trade security for inconvenience.
Yeah.
But a lot of the places in the French Quarter, they wouldn't put up these bollards and these barricades and stuff there because people couldn't deliver stuff to the restaurants and to the hotels and stuff like that down there conveniently.
Comes down to the money.
It comes down to money,
Yeah.
and people going, well, man, what's the chances of something like this happening?
Oh,
we
my
got
gosh.
to deliver stuff every day.
The bottom
here,
line is we are in this country now. Whether people want to agree with it or not, like you said, people live in their bubble.
Yeah.
But we're in a terrorist state.
Yeah.
We are now. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I would have never thought. All right, we're going to be like Israel. We're going to be like, any country in the Middle East or anything like that. We are now living that way. We're in a terrorist state. At any given time, in any part of the country, something like that can happen. I mean, for God's sake, what was it? October 20th of not last year, but the year before, Hamas drops into Israel and starts
October
going door to
7th.
door. Was it October 7th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starts going door to door, pulling people out of their house. Part of what the intel reports are from, if you listen to Sean Ryan, love the show that he puts out. He has this CIA targeter on there. She's been on there 3 times. Sarah Adams.
Yeah.
They
She's
call
sharp.
her. She is. She's sharp, and she has a plethora of knowledge on terrorist activity.
Yeah. Well, they're training. They're training right now, and she talks about the U.S. intelligence community doesn't want to recognize the fact that Osama bin Laden's son, one of his sons, is consolidating. He's going to these different terror groups. I mean, he's going.
He's bringing them together.
Al Qaeda,
wow.
the Taliban, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah. They're trying to bring all of them together into what they're calling the Islamic Army. And basically, they're trying to say, okay, this is all of us instead of us being factions against the West, against Europe, and against the United States, especially. So they're ramped up their training. They're even giving people alias names while they're in training. So if Eric and Thomas are in training, but your name is John and Dave, and then Eric gets caught, he'll say, well, I was there in this training camp with Dave, when that's not even your real name.
Their
So
tradecraft is getting
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
I mean, they know what they're doing, and Andy's right. They're used to, okay, well, ISIS would claim this attack, or Al Qaeda would claim this attack, or blah blah blah. No, he's bringing them all together. Their whole goal is to destroy the Western world.
way of life. Yeah.
And Sarah Adams has sat there and said, we're gonna have attacks in 2025, and sure enough, day one
Big
Yeah.
attack.
there
we have
it
an
is.
attack.
Yeah.
She even goes as far, was it her or was it, I want to say it was her, don't quote me on this, that said that what she expects is Hamas-style attacks in the United States, where Hamas-style operatives are going door to door, pulling people out of their houses.
Yeah.
That is scary.
Yeah.
That should terrify people. It shouldn't terrify people to where you lock yourself in your house.
Yeah.
You need to be vigilant. You need to be aware. You need to take the steps to protect yourself.
Right.
Obviously, I'm a strong advocate for the Second Amendment. Nothing wrong with owning guns.
Yeah.
Learn how to use them. Learn some tactics. Get some training. you're going to be the one that saves your life until, law enforcement or whoever gets there.
Right.
And, we've got to look at it like in this country now, we're in that state. We are in a terrorist state.
Yeah.
And if we don't start paying attention to that and bringing some serious to that, we're going to have some serious problems.
Right.
A lot of bloodshed.
Right.
So anyway, hey, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about some of those stories that we're going to talk about to start with.
What we just talked about here for the last hour or so, we didn't intend to go that long, but that's an episode within itself. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do several different Crime Chronicles stories so we can put those out. I think people will probably enjoy those more than they do our
banter.
our typical podcast.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So this will be the end of this episode, but check out the Crime Chronicles that we're going to be putting out. Those will be coming out as well.
See ya.